Mesdames et Messieurs, la 9334 séance du Conseil de sécurité est ouverte. L'ordre du jour provisoire de la présente séance est menace contre la paix et la sécurité internationale. L'ordre du jour est adopté. Conformément à l'article 37 du règlement intérieur provisoire du Conseil, j'invite le représentant de l'Ukraine à participer à la présente séance. Il est ainsi décidé. Conformément à l'article 39 du règlement intérieur provisoire du Conseil, j'invite M. Rafael Grossi, directeur général de l'Agence internationale de l'énergie atomique, à participer à la présente séance. Il est ainsi décidé. Le Conseil de sécurité va maintenant aborder l'examen du point 2 de l'ordre du jour. Je donne ainsi la parole à M. Rafael Grossi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank you and members of the Council allowing me the opportunity today to update you on the IAEA activities concerning the safety, security, and safeguards in Ukraine. Your own personal conviction in supporting me and the work of the IAEA has been remarkable. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I also thank the Council for their continuing support for the IAEA's efforts. I will also lay out the basic principles needed to prevent a nuclear accident. As you may remember, I have addressed the Council on the situation in Ukraine 4 times before, on 4 March, 11 August, 6 September, and 27 October last year. However, I see today's meeting as the most important one, and I will explain why. But first, I want to briefly update you on what the agency has been doing in Ukraine. It is now over 15 months since the beginning of the war. I remind you that this is the first time in history that a war is being fought amid the facilities of a major nuclear power program. This includes several of Ukraine's 5 nuclear power plants, and other facilities have come under direct shelling. And all NPPs have lost off-site power at some point. Furthermore, one of Ukraine's nuclear power plant, Zaporozhye NPP, has come under Russian military and operational control. The IAEA has been closely monitoring the situation and assisting Ukraine every single day since the start of the war. This assistance has involved the continuous engagement of the IAEA's Incident and Emergency Center. There have been 12 expert missions to Ukraine. I have personally led 7 of them, including 2 to the ZNPP. Additionally, since 1st September 2022, we have had an IAEA support and assistance mission stationed at Zaporozhye NPP, which is literally on the front lines of this war. And we are on the 8th rotation of our dedicated and courageous staff, who have had to cross that front line to undertake this vital work many times. 23 of our staff have been part of these teams. And since January this year, we have had other dedicated IAEA expert missions stationed at every other major Ukrainian nuclear sites: Rivne Nuclear Power Plant, South Ukraine Nuclear Power Plant, Nitsky Nuclear Power Plant, and the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. Their presence allowing us to provide the international community with reliable information on the safety and security situation at each one of those sites as well. Another 58 of our staff have been part of these teams, totaling more than 2,350 person days of our staff in Ukraine. And I wish to take the opportunity to thank the United Nations Secretary General and the Undersecretaries for Safety and Security and Operational Support, once again, for their help in making this happen. Moreover, we have facilitated an international assistance package totaling more than 5 million euros with 17 deliveries of vital equipment to Ukraine. And I thank Member States for their contribution in this regard. We are putting in place a comprehensive program of health care assistance, including through equipment and psychological support for all Ukrainian nuclear workers. In addition to our work on nuclear safety and security, we are also continuing our vital safeguards verification activities across Ukraine, ensuring that there is no diversion of nuclear material for military purposes. And we are keeping the world informed of the situation at Ukraine nuclear sites in more than 160 web statements, updates, reports and briefings, including to the United Nations General Assembly and to your distinguished selves here at the Security Council. Mr. President, the nuclear safety and security situation at the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant in particular continues to be extremely fragile and dangerous. Military activities continue in the region and may well increase very considerably in the near future. The plant has been operating on significantly reduced staff, which, despite being in temporary shutdown, is not sustainable. And there have been 7 occasions when the site lost all of-site power and had to rely on emergency diesel generators, which is, as you know, the last line of defense against a nuclear accident, to provide essential cooling of the reactor and spent fuel. The last one, the 7th, occurred just 1 week ago. We are fortunate that a nuclear accident has not yet happened. As I said at the IAEA Board of Governors last March, we are rolling a dice. And if this continues, then one day our luck will run out. So we must all do everything in our power to minimize the chance that it does. As the Council knows, since returning from my first of 2 missions to the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant last September, I have been urging all parties to protect the nuclear safety and security of the plant. This has involved numerous meetings, intensive consultations and exchanges, including at the highest levels in Ukraine and the Russian Federation. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as you would recall, already a year ago, I have elaborated the 7 indispensable pillars for ensuring nuclear safety and security during an armed conflict. These are, number 1, the physical integrity of facilities, whether it is the reactors, the fuel ponds, or radioactive waste stores, must be maintained. 2, all safety and security systems and equipment must be fully functional at all times. 3, the operating staff must be able to fulfill their safety and security duties and have the capacity to make decisions free of undue pressure. 4, there must be a secure off-site power supply from the grid for all nuclear sites. 5, there must be uninterrupted logistical supply chains and transportation to and from the sites. 6, there must be effective on-site and off-site radiation monitoring systems and emergency preparedness and response measures. And 7, there must be reliable communication with the regulator, and others. These common sense rules derive from a vast body of IAEA documents, guidelines, and experience. They have been universally quoted and supported, and this is very encouraging. A nuclear or radiological accident during the ongoing conflict could have disastrous consequences for the people of Ukraine, for the people of Russia, as well as neighboring states and beyond. The time has come to be more specific as to what is required. We must prevent a dangerous release of radioactive material. To that end, and mindful of the 7 indispensable pillars that I've just quoted, I have been working intensively and in consultation with the leadership of Ukraine and the Russian Federation. As a result of these intensive consultations, I have identified the following concrete principles to help ensure nuclear safety and security at ZNPP in order to prevent nuclear accident and ensure the integrity of the plant. I see these commitments as essential to avoid the danger of a catastrophic incident. Number 1, there should be no attack of any kind from or against the plant, in particular targeting the reactors, spent fuel storage, other critical infrastructure, or personnel. Number 2, ZNPP should not be used as storage or a base for heavy weapons. For example, multiple rocket launchers, artillery systems, and munitions and tanks, or military personnel that could be used for an attack from the plant. 3, off-site power to the plant should not be put at risk. To that effect, all efforts should be made to ensure that off-site power remains available and secure at all times. 4, all structures, systems, and components essential to the safe and secure operation of the plant should be protected from attacks or acts of sabotage. 5, no action should be taken that undermines these principles. The IAEA experts on site, namely the IAEA Support and Assistance Mission to Zaporozhye, ISAMS, will report to the IAEA Director General on the observance of these principles. The Director General will report publicly on any violation of these principles. Mr. President, I respectfully and solemnly ask both sides to observe these principles. I request distinguished members of the Security Council to unambiguously support them. Let me say something very clearly. These principles are to no one's detriment and to everyone's benefit. Avoiding a nuclear accident, Mr. President, is possible. Abiding by the IAEA's 5 principles is the way to start. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the IAEA 5 principles to avoid a nuclear accident are hereby established. The IAEA intends to start monitoring these principles through its on-site mission. I thank you very much for your attention, Mr. President.
Je remercie M. Grossi de son exposé. Je vais maintenant faire une déclaration en ma qualité de conseiller fédéral et chef du département fédéral des affaires étrangères de la Confédération suisse. Excellences, Monsieur le Directeur général, la Suisse salue l'engagement continu de l'Agence internationale de l'énergie atomique et de son directeur général pour assurer la protection des installations nucléaires civiles en Ukraine. La Suisse a souvent rappelé ici sa position quant à l'agression militaire russe contre l'Ukraine. Nous réitérons notre appel à la Fédération de Russie à retirer ses troupes du territoire ukrainien et nous condamnons toute attaque perpétuée contre des infrastructures civiles. Le respect du droit international en général et du droit international humanitaire en particulier constitue pour notre pays le fondement de la sécurité internationale. Les 7 piliers élaborés par l'IAEA résument parfaitement ce qui doit être fait pour garantir la sûreté nucléaire dans tous les conflits armés. Aujourd'hui, nous avons l'occasion de soutenir 5 principes concrets pour protéger la centrale nucléaire de Zaporozhye. 5 principes pour mettre en œuvre les 7 piliers dans ce cas particulier. 5 principes pour prévenir un désastre nucléaire avec toutes ses conséquences pour la population et l'environnement au-delà d'une génération. 5 principes donc pour assurer la protection de la population civile. La Suisse se félicite des efforts déployés par l'Agence et soutient pleinement ses propositions. Nous discutons ici d'une approche pragmatique et ciblée. Je suis persuadé que c'est une contribution importante dans cette situation de crise. La Suisse invite tous les membres du Conseil à soutenir les 7 piliers et les 5 principes proposés par l'Agence. Nous invitons en particulier la Fédération de Russie et l'Ukraine à pleinement mettre en œuvre ces 5 principes, à s'engager pour protéger la centrale nucléaire de Zaporozhye. Mesdames et Messieurs, Excellences, le respect du droit international humanitaire est une priorité de la politique étrangère suisse. Les conventions de Genève et leurs protocoles nous confèrent une claire et lourde responsabilité. Aucune infrastructure civile ne doit être attaquée lors de conflits armés et, deuxièmement, la population civile doit être protégée contre les conséquences de la guerre, notamment dans les territoires occupés. Les règles permettant d'assurer cette protection existent, mais leur mise en œuvre est insuffisante. La situation militaire est très tendue. Le danger autour de la centrale nucléaire demeure. Nous sommes toutes et tous conscients des risques encourus par la population civile quand une centrale nucléaire devient l'enjeu d'un conflit armé. Il est de notre devoir de les prévenir. La Suisse se félicite de pouvoir discuter au sein de ce Conseil des enjeux liés à la sûreté et à la sécurité de la centrale nucléaire de Zaporozhye. Nous engager pour la protection des populations civiles. C'est dans cet esprit que nous avons envisagé la présidence du Conseil. Merci beaucoup de votre attention. Je reprends maintenant mes fonctions de président du Conseil et je donne la parole au représentant de l'Équateur.
Señor Ministro Ignacio Cassis, presidente del Consejo de Seguridad. Al acercarnos al final del mes, aprovecho su presencia para reconocer la impecable labor de su país y de su delegación en la conducción del Consejo de Seguridad durante mayo. Agradezco también por la convocatoria a esta reunión, tal como fue solicitado por Francia y el Ecuador. Saludo también la participación del representante permanente de Ucrania. Deseo expresar mi mayor agradecimiento al director general del Organismo Internacional de Energía Atómica, Rafael Mariano Grossi, no solo por la claridad de su exposición informativa en un tema sensible, sino por su labor al frente de la IAEA y sus esfuerzos relativos a la situación de seguridad y protección nuclear en Ucrania. La valentía y el profesionalismo de su equipo en el terreno y su propio liderazgo, reflejado en sus visitas in situ en 2022 y 2023 a la central nuclear de Zaporozhye, enaltece la labor de la Agencia de Seguridad Nuclear de la ONU y el rol de esta organización. Reitero, por tanto, que el acceso y la permanencia segura, sin trabas y sin limitaciones para el IAEA en todos los niveles, en cualquier instalación nuclear, y en este caso en la de Zaporozhye, debe estar en todo momento garantizado. Asimismo, reitero la obligación que tienen las partes de facilitar el acceso de la IAEA a la información necesaria para valorar la situación de seguridad física y tecnológica. Reconozco también el sacrificio y dedicación del personal civil técnico ucraniano para asegurar el funcionamiento de las instalaciones nucleares de uso pacífico, y reiteramos además la obligación de preservarlos y facilitar la provisión de servicios de salud, incluyendo de salud mental. Más aún, Rusia debe cesar la agresión militar, tal como fue ordenado por la Corte Internacional de Justicia, y restituir el pleno control del territorio y de la infraestructura e instalaciones que pertenecen al pueblo de Ucrania, incluyendo la central de Zaporozhye. El mundo sigue en vilo, señor presidente, ante el peligro de una catástrofe nuclear, ya sea por el riesgo de un accidente en una planta de uso pacífico, como por la amenaza que suponen las armas nucleares. En ambos casos, por sus catastróficas consecuencias humanitarias y la devastación que supone para la vida humana y el medio ambiente. Llamamos a que cesen las narrativas y acciones corrosivas para evitar malas interpretaciones o errores de cálculo, y a evitar también cualquier acción que ponga en peligro las instalaciones nucleares. Las partes deben cumplir con la garantía que ofrece el Tratado de No Proliferación para el Uso Pacífico de la Energía Nuclear. Al respecto, lamentamos que en el momento más crítico para los objetivos del tratado y cuando más se requería fortalecerlo, la 10ª conferencia del examen celebrada en esta sede en agosto de 2022 se haya visto impedida de adoptar sus recomendaciones finales. Lamentamos también que hasta la fecha no haya sido posible la creación de una zona de seguridad nuclear. Con más razón, este Consejo debe exigir el respeto del Estatuto de la IAEA, de la Carta de la ONU, de la Convención sobre Seguridad Nuclear, de la Convención Conjunta sobre Seguridad en la Gestión de Combustible Gastado y de la Convención sobre la Protección Física de los Materiales Nucleares y su enmienda, y del derecho internacional humanitario. El Ecuador reitera además la necesidad de que se cumpla con los 7 pilares de la seguridad nuclear y confirma su pleno apoyo para los 5 principios que promueve el director general de la IAEA. Alentamos a las partes a acordar y comprometer con su implementación. Si bien se trata de principios mínimos, se trata también de elementos vitales sobre cuyo cumplimiento los expertos de la IAEA en el terreno deberían tener la capacidad absoluta de informar. Debo destacar que las diferentes propuestas y esquema de paz, ya sea el plan de 10 puntos del presidente Zelensky o los 12 puntos de la propuesta de plan de paz de China, incluyen todos ellos la seguridad nuclear entre los componentes centrales. Más aún, la resolución sexta del 11º periodo de sesiones de emergencia de la Asamblea General del 23 de febrero pasado sobre los principios de la Carta de la ONU subyacentes a una paz general, justa y duradera en Ucrania, insta a todos los Estados miembros a que cooperen con espíritu solidario para hacer frente a las repercusiones de la guerra en la seguridad nuclear. Señor presidente, un acuerdo que garantice la seguridad y protección nuclear es indispensable para reducir los riesgos y aliviar la tensión en este ámbito, así como para la vida humana, la salud, el medio ambiente y el patrimonio energético del pueblo de Ucrania, como constituye en este caso la mayor planta nuclear de Europa. Muchas gracias.
Le représentant de l'Équateur et je donne la parole à la représentante de la France.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie le directeur général pour sa présentation et je salue sa présence parmi nous aujourd'hui. Monsieur le Président, il y a tout juste une semaine, la centrale nucléaire de Zaporozhye a été de nouveau privée d'électricité pendant plusieurs heures pour la 7e fois depuis le début de l'agression russe. Pour la 7e fois, nous sommes donc passés près d'un accident nucléaire dans la plus grande centrale nucléaire d'Europe. Centrale que la Russie a coupée de ses lignes d'alimentation électrique de secours. La France est très préoccupée par la menace qui pèse sur la sûreté et la sécurité des installations nucléaires de l'Ukraine. La dégradation des conditions d'accès qui n'ont pas permis à l'IAEA d'opérer la rotation de l'équipe d'experts qui devait avoir lieu ce week-end est extrêmement inquiétante. La Russie porte seule la responsabilité de cette situation et c'est elle, nous le savons, qui a saisi de force cette centrale. C'est elle qui a massé des forces armées et des équipements militaires sur place. Le minage des abords, la consolidation de positions militaires sur le site de la centrale sont inacceptables. Monsieur le Président, nous devons agir afin d'éviter un accident aux conséquences irréparables. Premièrement, la France continue d'appeler instamment la Russie à rendre à l'Ukraine le contrôle total de toutes les installations nucléaires, à cesser d'exercer pression, menaces sur les personnels qui aggravent le risque d'une erreur humaine. Surtout, la Russie doit cesser d'utiliser la centrale de Zaporozhye comme une base militaire. Deuxièmement, la France rappelle que si la démilitarisation de la centrale de Zaporozhye demeure une priorité, elle est pleinement engagée dans l'intervalle pour réduire dès maintenant le risque d'accident nucléaire sur cette centrale. Et à cette fin, elle salue et soutient pleinement les efforts déployés par le directeur général de l'IAEA. Les principes que vient de nous exposer le directeur général sont en effet de nature à assurer la sûreté et la sécurité des installations nucléaires. Nous les soutenons, nous continuerons d'appuyer l'agence dans ses efforts pour progresser sur ce plan qui respecte la souveraineté et l'intégrité territoriale ukrainienne. Troisièmement, il est essentiel de pérenniser l'accès des experts de l'IAEA à toutes les infrastructures nucléaires de l'Ukraine. Elle doit pouvoir communiquer directement, sans ingérence, avec le personnel ukrainien chargé de l'exploitation de ces installations. Monsieur le Président, la France continuera de soutenir l'Ukraine et c'est pourquoi elle a signé avec l'IAEA et avec l'Agence de l'énergie atomique ukrainienne un accord le 5 mai dernier, accord qui permettra de garantir le fonctionnement des générateurs de secours de la centrale nucléaire Ukraine du Sud. Notre position est claire. La centrale de Zaporozhye doit revenir en toute sécurité à l'Ukraine. La Russie doit retirer ses troupes, elle doit cesser de jouer avec le feu. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie la représentante de la France et je donne maintenant la parole au représentant de la Fédération de Russie.
Господин председатель, благодарим генерального директора МАГАТЭ Рафаэля Гросси за брифинг. Обеспечение ядерной и физической безопасности ядерных объектов всегда было и остается безусловным приоритетом нашей страны. Россия с самого начала при поддержке руководства агентства прилагала все возможные усилия, направленные на предотвращение угроз безопасности Запорожской атомной электростанции, создаваемых режимом Зеленского и его западными кураторами. Анонсированная после посещения 1 сентября 2022 года ЗАЭС инициатива гендиректора МАГАТЭ о создании зоны защиты эксплуатационной и физической ядерной безопасности на станции содержала ряд важных элементов, выполнение которых содействовало бы прекращению украинских атак на атомную электростанцию, а также недопущению возникновения аварийной ситуации или техногенной катастрофы с непредсказуемыми последствиями. Генеральным директором МАГАТЭ и секретариатом агентства была проделана огромная работа в этом направлении, однако из-за недоговороспособности Киева и его нежелания взять на себя обязательства не обстреливать ЗАЭС, реализовать данную инициативу так и не удалось. Разделяем опасения генерального директора МАГАТЭ по поводу сохраняющихся угроз безопасности ЗАЭС. Проводившиеся Украиной обстрелы ЗАЭС абсолютно недопустимы. Предложение господина Гросси по обеспечению безопасности станции соответствует тем мерам, которые мы и так уже давно осуществляем в национальном качестве в соответствии с решениями, принятыми на национальном уровне. Так, с территории Запорожской атомной электростанции никаких атак никогда не было. На станции никогда не размещались тяжелое вооружение и боеприпасы к ним. Нет на ЗАЭС и военного персонала, который мог бы использоваться для нападений с территории станции. Нами осуществлены конкретные шаги по защите наиболее чувствительных структур, систем и компонентов станции от нападений или диверсий. В создавшихся условиях Россия намерена предпринять все возможные меры для усиления ядерной и физической безопасности станции в соответствии с национальным законодательством и взятыми на себя обязательствами, вытекающими из профильных международно-правовых инструментов, участником которых является наша страна. В свете упомянутых генеральным директором МАГАТЭ принципов ядерной и физической ядерной безопасности мы продолжим обеспечивать защиту ЗАЭС таким образом, чтобы не дать возможности Киеву и коллективному Западу их грубо и безответственно нарушать. Россия будет предельно жестко отвечать на любые атаки Украины на ЗАЭС, критически важные объекты ее инфраструктуры, включая линии энергоснабжения станции, а также на город Энергодар, в котором проживают сотрудники АЭС и члены их семей. Рассчитываем на то, что с учетом сделанного господином Гросси заявления, секретариат МАГАТЭ со своей стороны также продемонстрирует непредвзятость и неангажированность агентства и открыто осудит действия Украины, которая уже неоднократно подводила мир к черте ядерного инцидента, который может сказаться не только на территории вокруг атомной электростанции, но и далеко за ее пределами, в том числе в Европе. И это станет ядерной катастрофой. Благодарю вас.
Je remercie les représentants de la Fédération de Russie et je donne maintenant la parole aux représentants du Mozambique.
Mr. President, we are delighted to see you back in New York for the final stretch of a very successful first ever presidency of the Security Council by your country. I thank Mr. Rafael Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, for his important briefing. I acknowledge the presence of the permanent representative of Ukraine in this meeting. Mr. President, the bulletin of the atomic scientists set this year its doomsday clock at 90 seconds to midnight. This is the closest to midnight the clock has ever been since it was established in 1947 to illustrate the global existential threat as the dawn of the nuclear weapons age. This sense of urgency was echoed by the IAEA in its publication called Nuclear Safety, Security and Safeguards in Ukraine from February 2022 to February 2023, which is stated, and I quote, "Since the start of the armed conflict, the events that have arisen have either partially or fully compromised the IAEA's 7 indispensable pillars for ensuring nuclear safety and security during an armed conflict for almost all nuclear facilities and many activities involving radioactive sources in Ukraine." End of quote. Mr. President, this conflict reminds the world of a potential that the escalation of the conflict into nuclear conflagration, either by accident, intention, or miscalculation, is a real possibility. The conflict has already put nuclear reactor sites in Chernobyl and in Zaporozhye in the midst of a war zone, risking the widespread release of radioactive materials. To add to the sense of urgency, nuclear doctrine postures are being revived and non-proliferation agreements are suspended. While deterrence theory has traditionally dominated nuclear doctrines, we are witnessing shifts towards doctrines emphasizing limited use of tactical nuclear weapons as possible deterrence response to the use of similar weapons by an adversary. These changes increase the risk of misunderstandings, miscalculations, and unintended escalation, all of which undermine our effort towards a nuclear-safe world. Mr. President, Mozambique supports any measure aiming at protecting and preventing any nuclear incident or accident, including those put forward by the IAEA's Director General. The IAEA, as we heard, emphasized the importance of a stringent, globally coordinated approach to nuclear safety. An African perspective on this issue advocates for reinforced collective responsibilities in which a nuclear threat anywhere is a threat to all humanity, as stated in our Pelindaba Treaty. Therefore, it's our collective responsibility to avoid a scenario of a repeat of a nuclear incident or accident in Ukraine and in an already fragile geopolitical context. Mr. President, in conclusion, we must commit to a cooperative global effort to enhance nuclear safety and security in Ukraine and indeed the world. We must heed the IAEA's advice and support the talks for an agreement on the urgent establishment of nuclear safety and security protection zones. As we repeatedly stated, ending the conflict is the most viable and sustainable solution to ensure nuclear safety and security, leading to safe lives and indeed humanity. This conflict has gone too far and has brought us to this febrile and dangerously destabilizing place of imminent nuclear confrontation. In this regard, we reiterate our call for the immediate cessation of hostilities and return to direct negotiation between the parties as a matter of urgent action by the Security Council. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant du Mozambique et je passe la parole à la représentante des États-Unis.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Director General Grossi, for briefing the Council on this pressing issue. And I'd like to welcome the permanent representative of Ukraine to this meeting. The United States appreciates the focus and leadership the IAEA has demonstrated in its efforts to help prevent a nuclear calamity in Ukraine, particularly at the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant. I also extend my heartfelt thanks to the IAEA and Ukrainian staff at Zaporozhye who have labored under unimaginable pressure to prevent a catastrophic incident. Director General Grossi, we appreciate the concrete principles you have presented to us today. We urge everyone in this room to support these important principles, just as we urge everyone in this room to support all efforts to avoid a nuclear incident at Zaporozhye, an incident that could catastrophically impact both Ukraine and the surrounding region. The principles laid out today should foster an ongoing discussion about the steps we must take to ensure nuclear safety and security at Zaporozhye. I'll also note that these principles build on the 7 indispensable pillars of nuclear safety and security, which the Director General introduced last spring. But colleagues, we know that one country, a permanent member of this Council, continues to demonstrate its flagrant disregard for these principles. Since March of last year, when Russia illegally seized the Zaporozhye plant, the international community has held its breath each time the facility has been hit by shells, each time it has lost external power, each time Russian forces have detained essential staff. An imagery released in April by the United Kingdom, which showed Russian military emplacements atop reactors at the plant, only exacerbated our concerns about the facility's nuclear safety. To make matters worse, recent news reports indicate that Moscow has disconnected Zaporozhye's vital radiation monitoring sensors, which means the plant's data is now being sent to the Russian nuclear regulator. This is a clear escalation of Russia's efforts to undermine Ukrainian sovereignty and authority over the Zaporozhye plant. And this undermines our ability to have confidence in the level of nuclear safety at the plant. Let me be clear. The Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant belongs to Ukraine, and its data must go to Ukraine, not to Russia. Russia's reckless actions stand in stark contrast to Ukraine's responsible behavior. Throughout this conflict, Director General Grossi has made clear that Ukraine has fully cooperated in implementing safeguards at all its nuclear facilities, and that the IAEA has not found any indication of a proliferation concern in Ukraine. The IAEA's independent assessments have been essential to verifying the lack of diversion of nuclear material in Ukraine. And the presence of the agency's technical experts has helped support the safe and secure operation at all of Ukraine's nuclear power plants. Colleagues, those of us who sit on this council are entrusted with a sacred responsibility to maintain international peace and security. And there's no doubt that Russia's actions are an attack on the safety and security of the region and the world. And we must stand together and demand President Putin in this madness. If Russia wants to show that it is serious about reducing nuclear risk at Zaporozhye, it can take steps to remove its weapons and civil military personnel from the plant, maintain an uninterrupted power supply to the plant from the territory under Ukraine's control, provide a humanitarian corridor to rotate Ukrainian personnel at the plant, to reconnect the plant's radiation monitoring systems, and return full control of the plant to the competent Ukrainian authorities. And if Russia wants to show that it is serious about reducing nuclear risk more broadly, it must stop its irresponsible nuclear rhetoric and stop undermining the arms control regime. The United States is also deeply concerned about Russia's stated intent to deploy nuclear weapons in Belarus. We all should be. It is entirely within Moscow's control to avert a nuclear catastrophe and to end this war of aggression against Ukraine, a war that has caused so much pain, destruction, and death. The United States will continue to stand with the Ukrainian people and support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie la représentante des Nations Unies et je donne la parole à la représentante du Gabon.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie le directeur général Rafael Grossi pour les informations qu'il vient de partager avec le Conseil, informations qui font état d'une situation volatile aux abords de la centrale nucléaire de Zaporozhye. Le fait que la centrale nucléaire de Zaporozhye ait à nouveau été déconnectée du réseau électrique national pendant plusieurs heures la semaine dernière est très alarmant. Coupé de toute alimentation externe, le système de refroidissement de la centrale a dû se faire au moyen de générateurs de secours. La situation est de toute évidence loin d'être maîtrisée, car le risque d'une surchauffe pouvant conduire à un accident nucléaire continue d'être plausible. Je voudrais faire mien les propos du directeur général de l'IAEA pour dire que cette situation ne peut pas perdurer. Un risque aussi grave doit être absolument évité. Je salue l'engagement inlassable de Rafael Grossi et de ses équipes d'experts qui sont sur le terrain et qui multiplient les efforts pour contenir la situation et éviter une catastrophe potentielle. Pour cela, mon pays soutient les 5 principes proposés par l'IAEA pour sécuriser la centrale nucléaire. À cet égard, je voudrais faire les observations additionnelles suivantes. Premièrement, mon pays condamne toute manipulation ou tentative de marchandage utilisant la menace nucléaire. Les conséquences potentielles d'un accident nucléaire sont connues de tous et personne n'a le droit de faire courir au monde un tel risque. Deuxièmement, nous refusons toute tentative de politisation de la question et soulignons le rôle central et exclusif que l'IAEA doit continuer de jouer en matière de sécurité et de sûreté nucléaire. Troisièmement, les centrales nucléaires sont des infrastructures civiles protégées par le droit international humanitaire et de façon plus spécifique par un certain nombre d'instruments tels que l'amendement à la Convention sur la protection physique des matières nucléaires, le Code de conduite sur la sûreté et la sécurité des sources radioactives ou encore la Convention internationale pour la répression des actes de terrorisme nucléaire. Les belligérants doivent s'y conformer. Quatrièmement, j'exhorte les parties à coopérer en toute transparence avec l'IAEA afin de parvenir à la mise en œuvre de ces 5 principes de sécurité afin de réduire le risque d'accident et de rétablir la conformité des 7 piliers de sécurité garantissant le fonctionnement normal de la centrale. Monsieur le Président, nous réitérons notre appel à la désescalade. Les bombardements contre la centrale doivent cesser. De même, mon pays est opposé à toute action des parties qui contribuerait à augmenter le risque d'une escalade nucléaire du conflit. La tendance à la banalisation d'une nucléarisation du conflit est plus que regrettable. L'histoire très récente parle pourtant d'elle-même sur l'ampleur des dégâts liés à une catastrophe nucléaire sur les populations et sur l'environnement. Les parties doivent s'engager à dialoguer pour mettre fin à la guerre. C'est la seule issue viable à ce conflit. Nous continuons d'encourager les initiatives qui visent à amener les parties à la négociation. Nous restons convaincus que cela est possible si les parties bâtissent sur le modèle de l'accord sur les céréales de la mer Noire. Enfin, les canaux de la diplomatie doivent supplanter les paris hasardeux de la force brutale et la coexistence pacifique prévaloir à la logique de l'affrontement. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Merci à la représentante du Gabon et je donne maintenant la parole à la représentante du Royaume-Uni.
Thank you, President. And I thank Director General Grossi for your briefing. Since the start of its full-scale invasion, Russia's reckless actions at nuclear facilities across Ukraine have threatened the safety of Ukrainians and the international community. Let me be clear. Russia's control of Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant is illegal and continues to pose a serious threat to the facility's safe and secure functioning. the IAEA's February report confirmed the continued presence of military personnel and activity across the site, and described a situation that is, I quote, dangerous, precarious, and challenging. Unauthorized military vehicles and stores sit in turbine halls. Landmines in the vicinity of the plant endanger Ukrainian operating staff and delay maintenance work. Supply chains and associated logistics continue to be severely impacted by the conflict, and off-site power supplies remain vulnerable. New imagery shows Russian forces have established sandbag fighting positions on the roofs of several of the 6 reactor buildings. This indicates that they have integrated the actual reactor buildings of Europe's largest nuclear power plant into tactical defense planning. Russia's actions have violated all of Director General Grossi's 7 pillars of nuclear safety and security. We've always been clear that as long as Russia's illegal control of the plant continues, its safe and secure operation cannot be ensured. As the Director General said, the situation simply cannot go on. I thank him and his colleagues at the IAEA for their bravery and for their ceaseless efforts to support nuclear safety and security in Ukraine, together with the Ukrainian government. We continue to support the IAEA's work in Ukraine and its efforts to ensure the safe and secure use of nuclear technology around the world. We recognise Director General Grossi's efforts to maintain safety at the Zaporozhye plant, including through his 5 principles, as part of a solution that respects Ukraine's sovereignty. I pay tribute too to the bravery, professionalism and resilience of Ukrainian staff at the plant, who continue to work tirelessly under duress. President, the situation at Zaporozhye is entirely of Russia's making. Russia can resolve this situation at any time. It should withdraw its troops from the plant and from all of Ukraine. I thank you.
Je remercie la représentante du Royaume-Uni et je donne maintenant la parole à la représentante du Japon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to begin my statement by expressing our sincere appreciation to Director General Grossi for his insightful briefing on the latest developments on the ground. We reaffirm support for the 7 indispensable pillars of nuclear safety and nuclear security and highlight the importance of ensuring and promoting the safety and security of nuclear facilities under any circumstances. Mr. President, we once again express our gravest concern over Russia's grossly irresponsible seizure and militarization of the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant. This poses a serious threat to the nuclear safety and security of not only Ukraine, but also Europe and the entire world. As the Director General said just now, the situation of the ZNPP and its Ukrainian operating staff remains dangerous and precarious, with the 7 pillars outlined by the Director General being compromised constantly. We condemn it in the strongest terms, Russia's manifest violation of the UN Charter and its aggression against Ukraine, as well as Russia's continued control over the ZNPP. Japan strongly urges the Russian Federation to immediately withdraw its forces and personnel from the ZNPP. We also condemn the signing by the defense ministers of Russia and Belarus of an agreement establishing procedures for the deployment of Russian tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, which further increases the tension while Russia continues its aggression against Ukraine. Japan can never accept Russia's nuclear threat, let alone its use of nuclear weapons under any circumstances. Other member states should also refrain from supporting such actions either directly or indirectly. Mr. President, Japan reiterates its deep appreciation to Director General Grossi and the Secretariat and continues to support their efforts to strengthen nuclear safety and security of, and the appreciation of safeguards to, nuclear material and facilities in Ukraine. We salute the continuous presence of IAEA experts and their focus on ensuring nuclear safety and security at the site during this very difficult time. In this regard, we also commend the ongoing work by Director General to protect the nuclear safety and security of the nuclear facilities. In particular, the role of the ISAMs is essential for acquiring first-hand, objective, and impartial observation about the situation regarding the ZNPP. Japan has provided a financial contribution for the Secretariat to facilitate missions, including support for the procurement of special vehicle for the periodic rotation system of IAEA staff, bringing our total contribution for the IAEA's activities to approximately 12 million euros. Mr. President, Japan continues to support DG Grossi's efforts in a manner that respects Ukrainian sovereignty over its internationally recognized territory. I thank you.
Je remercie la représentante du Japon et je passe la parole au représentant de l'Albanie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I thank the Director General Grossi for his presentation and his new proposal. Albania appreciates the professionalism, objectivity and impartiality of the IAEA and considers the role of the agency essential for the non-proliferation regime. We support its continued efforts to secure the protection of the Zaporozhye Nuclear Plant in Ukraine. Colleagues, since Russia invaded Ukraine and occupied Zaporozhye, we have asked some very basic yet fundamental questions. Under which rights and rules has Russia occupied and taken ownership of a key piece of the power generation infrastructure of another country? Under which logic has Russia militarized the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe? These, like other questions related to the war of choice in Ukraine, remain unanswered to date, save the propaganda and the distorted narrative aimed for domestic use. We know that since its occupation, the normal activity of the facility has been severely disrupted and in no less than 7 cases it has lost all external power for several hours, creating an extremely precarious nuclear safety and security situation for a major disaster. Professionals have long warned that on-site diesel generators cannot cool each of the 6 reactors in the long term. And for as long as the current situation continues, the risk of major escalation is real, a clear and present danger. Albania strongly condemns the illegal seizure of the Ukrainian nuclear power plants by Russia and its militarization. The intentional weaponization of a nuclear plant is wrong and dangerous. Because there is no other case in history, no other one, when a nuclear plant has been used as a shield to protect military troops and hardware, as Russia is doing. This absurd and dangerous situation cries the need for urgent international regulation governing nuclear power plants in our time, and we hope the IAEA will tackle the issue. In the meantime, we call on Russia to implement without delay the resolutions of the IAEA Board of Governors so that the competent Ukrainian authorities regain full control of all nuclear facilities located within internationally recognized borders of Ukraine, including the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant. Ukrainian personnel operating in the plant under Russian occupation must be able to perform their important duties without restrictions, threats or pressure, and the supply networks must be restored to ensure the stability of the plant's 6 reactors. Mr. President, As stated earlier by DG Grossi, the general situation in the area near the Zaporozhye remains unpredictable and potentially dangerous, undermining the 7 essential pillars of nuclear safety and security as defined by the IAEA. It is therefore imperative to protect the plant, to prevent the risk of a serious nuclear accident with catastrophic consequences for the population and the environment. The proposals presented today by DG Grossi could be a good basis to ensure the protection and safety of the nuclear facilities in Ukraine and specifically the Zaporozhye power plant, and we have full confidence in the IAEA in facilitating its implementation. But the root of the problem will remain unresolved until Russia withdraws its troops from Ukraine's nuclear facilities and transfers their control to the legitimate Ukrainian authorities. Only this will offer the best guarantee for the protection and safety of nuclear power plants in Ukraine. Russia's military has no business in Ukraine's power plants. Russian military have no business in Ukraine. This is why we reiterate our call on Russia to put an end to the war, withdraw its troops from the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine, and start sincere talks for a peaceful solution. Any initiative to reaching a just and sustainable peace must be in full respect of international law, the UN Charter and the resolutions adopted by the General Assembly. Colleagues, we don't need to wait and hope for the dice to roll and bring luck. We need to ask, insist, work, and expect for Russia to come to reason. And I thank you.
Merci au représentant de l'Albanie. Je passe maintenant la parole au représentant du Brésil.
Thank you. Mr. President, let me start by congratulating Switzerland for an impeccable presidency of this organ during the month of May. I would like also to underline the excellent cooperation between the delegations of Brazil and Switzerland during this period when we have coincided as elected members of the Security Council. Allow me also to thank Director General Grossi for his detailed and very important briefing. Brazil is a strong supporter of the IAEA. We have been especially appreciative of the agency's recent efforts to enhance transparency and trust and to ensure the safe and secure operation of nuclear facilities in challenging dossiers. We believe the agency has played and should continue to play a key role in ensuring the safety and security of nuclear facilities in a way that is depoliticized and open to dialogue with all stakeholders. As Director General Grossi has said in this Council on previous occasions, nuclear accidents do not recognize borders. We are encouraged by the fact that the IAEA has been able to keep a permanent presence at Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant, providing both technical support for operations through its experts as well as timely updates on the plant's functioning through its public-facing communications. We strongly support IAEA's 7 pillars of nuclear safety and security in armed conflict, and we welcome reports that the plant continues to have sufficient staff for the safe operation of the plant. We nevertheless are concerned by the reiterated disruptions to the plant's only existing external power line, which was temporarily disconnected last week for the 7th time. Each of these disruptions raises the risk of a nuclear accident. These repeated disruptions to plant operations also make the system less safe. Upholding the 7 pillars requires preserving secure off-site power at all times. Brazil welcomes the proposal presented today by the Director General on the 5 principles for addressing the situation in the Zaporozhye power plant. These principles represent an adequate solution for the political pitfalls that have thus far prevented full implementation of the 7 pillars of nuclear safety and security in the plant. We call on both parties to the conflict to individually confirm to the IAEA their intention to adhere to those principles, which represent the best way to avoid a nuclear catastrophe until a complete cessation of hostilities can be achieved. We hope that future reports by the DJ on the situation in Zaporozhye Power Plant will include information on the implementation of the 5 principles. Brazil cannot stress enough how critical is the importance of safe and secure nuclear facilities. Mr. President, the Brazilian-Argentine Agency for Accounting and Control of Nuclear Materials, ABACC, is a success story with potential lessons. As recognized by the UN Resolution 76/52, adopted by consensus in December 2021, the agency has been an effective bilateral confidence-building mechanism with positive effects for peace and security at sub-regional and regional levels. We are fully aware that we cannot draw a direct parallel to the current situation in Ukraine and that of objectives of ABACC and are not related to safety and nuclear facilities. Nevertheless, that experience in our region may inspire us to think on how to explore cooperation on technical issues as an effective confidence-building measure. Cooperation at the technical level can in fact be a driver for dialogue in other areas, contributing to a positive cycle, as Brazil and Argentina have now sustained for over 3 decades. We hope to tap on that experience and on the contribution of regional mechanisms for cooperation and peace and security during our presidency in October. Mr. President, despite the divergent perspectives on how the conflict in Ukraine should be resolved, there is a consensus on the need to prevent a nuclear disaster to take place in Zaporozhye. A radius of protection of the plant must be ensured, and this should be seen as an opportunity to establish confidence-building measures among all the different parties involved. The agency and other partners could help facilitate this process, but it requires political will from all actors directly involved. And I thank you.
Je vous remercie de votre déclaration et en ma qualité de représentant de la Suisse, de vos mots de remerciement. Je donne maintenant la parole au représentant de la Chine.
卡西斯外长阁下，首先我欢迎你主持今天下午这场重要的会议，也祝贺瑞士圆满完成安理会5月轮值主席的工作。诸位先生，我感谢格罗西总干事的通报。当前，乌克兰危机仍在延宕，形势依然严峻。中方始终站在和平一边，站在对话一边，坚持劝和促谈，推动政治解决，期待并支持俄乌双方尽快重启和谈。这需要国际社会的共同努力，更需要当事各方从自身做起，通过积累互信，不断创造条件。乌克兰危机的持续对乌克兰核设施的安全安保构成严峻挑战。中方在此前安理会的有关审议中，曾多次阐明立场。今年2月24日发布关于政治解决乌克兰危机的中国立场，专门呼吁维护核电站安全，反对武装攻击核电站等和平核设施。 令人不安的是，尽管包括中国在内的国际社会一再发出警告和呼吁，扎波罗热核电站及周边地区的军事行动仍接连发生，外部电力供应曾数度中断，有关设施也多次受损，该地区的军事风险一直有增无减。中方对此深感担忧。国际原子能机构总干事聚焦各方共同关切，提出包括5项原则的扎波罗热核电站安全倡议，并为此积极进行斡旋。中方对格罗西总干事的努力表示赞赏，支持他和国际原子能机构为促进核设施的安全安保发挥建设性作用。我们呼吁有关当事方坚持人道精神，坚持科学理性，坚持沟通合作，严格遵守核安全公约等相关国际法，避免采取任何危及核设施的行为，全力避免任何意外的发生。主席先生，扎波罗热核电站安全安保问题只是乌克兰危机的一个方面，其解决最终取决于乌克兰危机的政治解决前景。各方应着眼和平大局和共同安全，相向而行，为重启对话和妥善解决包括核电站安全安保在内的相关问题创造有利条件。有重要影响的国家应发挥负责任和建设性的作用，而不是拱火浇油。中方将继续致力于劝和促谈，为推动乌克兰危机的政治解决发挥建设性作用。谢谢主席。
Je remercie le représentant de la Chine de sa déclaration et je le remercie personnellement pour les remerciements. Je donne maintenant la parole à la représentante du Ghana.
Mr. President, Your Excellency, Mr. Ignacio Cassis, I warmly welcome your presence for this meeting as we once again seek convergence to address the critical concerns of nuclear safety and security arising from the Russian Federation's sustained aggression against Ukraine. I thank Ecuador and France for their initiative in calling for today's meeting, and also thank Mr. Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, for his briefing, which highlighted efforts to rein in those actions that undermine the physical and operational integrity of the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant, Europe's largest nuclear plant. My delegation continues to share in the concerns expressed in today's briefing and more fully espoused in the report of the IAEA issued in February this year and in the subsequent situational reports on Ukraine. Ghana considers it extremely important for nuclear facilities anywhere to be operated with the highest standards of safety and security. It is in this context that we fully support the 7 pillars of nuclear safety first outlined in March 2022 to address the issues relating to the physical integrity of the facilities, the functionality of equipment and security systems, the safety and independence of operating staff, secure off-site power supply, uninterrupted logistical supply chains and transportation, effective radiation monitoring systems, emergency preparedness and response measures, and reliable communications with the regulator and other stakeholders. In the precarious context of the ongoing violent conflict in Ukraine, where the associated risks to human lives and the environment are elevated, we affirm that these pillars are important of themselves and need to be implemented as a collective to realize the full gamut of protection that they can afford Ukraine and the world at large. We urge the cooperation of the parties on all necessary measures, including the commitments just outlined by Director General Grossi, to ensure nuclear safety and security, beginning with the demarcation of a demilitarized zone in and around the power plant and its facilities. All efforts must also be made to restore the civilian character of the power plant at the earliest. We encourage continuous monitoring, as is being done during the various mechanisms of the IAEA, including the expert missions to Ukraine and the establishment of the presence of technical experts at the facility, and also welcome further engagements with the Security Council on the implementation of the outlined pillars and commitments. Mr. President, today's meeting offers an opportunity to remind ourselves of the historical, ethical, and normative underpinnings of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, and in so doing to collectively renew our commitment in support of a world without nuclear weapons. We encourage restraint in rhetoric and actions that carry the potential to further escalate and protract the war. Our view is that ending the war on Ukraine is the best way to reduce the chances of accidental risk and avoid a catastrophic incident of global magnitude. Mr. President, our concerns on the humanitarian aspects of the war remain unresolved as we continue to witness the persistent targeting of civilian populated areas contrary to the stipulations of international humanitarian law. In this month of May, the city of Kiev has experienced more than 15 episodes of drone and missile attacks with reported incidents of civilian casualties. We are compelled to reiterate the obligations of warring parties to respect and uphold the rules of international law, including international humanitarian law and human rights laws. In the context of today's discussions, we also underline Article 56 of Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Convention, which specifically prohibits attacks against works or installations, including nuclear electrical generating facilities, if such attacks may cause the release of dangerous forces and consequently cause severe loss among civilian populations. Ghana remains resolute in the call for peace in Ukraine, and on that basis, we reiterate the urgent need for the cessation of hostilities to curtail the loss, suffering, and destruction which unfortunately has not let up since the commencement of the war in February last year. We reaffirm our support for political settlement through the channels of dialogue and diplomacy, and maintain the viewpoint that all peace efforts must respect and uphold international law and the core principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Lastly, I reaffirm Ghana's unwavering commitment to the sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and call on the Russian Federation to end the war by the immediate and unconditional withdrawal of its troops from the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine. I thank you.
Je remercie la représentante du Ghana et je donne maintenant la parole à la représentante des Émirats arabes unis.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would like to thank Director General Grossi for his valuable briefing today. I extend my gratitude to him and his team at the IAEA for their efforts since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. The UAE welcomes your ongoing engagement with all relevant actors to ensure the safety and security of Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant. This report follows months of careful assessment and visits to the site by the IAEA, and we appreciate that technical approach of the team of experts which emphasizes nuclear safety and security on the ground. We urge all relevant parties to cooperate with the IAEA. Mr. President, the situation surrounding Zaporozhye remains alarming. The fact that Chernobyl and Fukushima have been invoked in this chamber and elsewhere shows that the world has not forgotten how grave the consequences of nuclear misstep could be. It is also reminds us that when comes to nuclear safety, our security is intertwined. A nuclear accident would have catastrophic consequences for Ukraine, the wider region, and the world. We remain concerned by disconnections of the power plant from the Ukrainian electrical grid. This has resulted in an interruption of energy supplies that further threatens the safety and lives of Ukrainians already living in a severe humanitarian situation. De-escalation is critically important to guarantee the plant's normal functioning and to prevent a nuclear disaster from becoming an unintended consequence of this war. Ensuring the safety of nuclear facilities is the utmost importance for the UAE. We recall the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law of necessity, proportionality, and distinction, and the special protection that nuclear facilities are afforded under international humanitarian law. This includes under the additional protocol to the 1949 Geneva Conventions, as well as the obligations to take care to protect the natural environment against widespread, long-term, and severe damage. These obligations must be protected and respected. In recent weeks, we have seen positive development emerge. The Black Sea Grain Initiative will continue for another 60 days. These efforts are proof of what can be achieved when there is political will. The initiative should be taken seriously. And by opening the door to political discussions, the initiative's potential as a confidence-building measure could lay the groundwork for further talks aimed at a resolution to this conflict. As we have said many times before, the cessation of hostilities throughout Ukraine is the only way to guarantee the prevention of a nuclear miscalculation. We reiterate our call for de-escalation and dialogue to bring this conflict to peaceful, sustainable solution in line with the UN Charter. I would like to conclude by congratulating Switzerland for its outstanding presidency of the Council this month. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie, Madame, de votre déclaration et en ma qualité nationale aussi pour vos mots de remerciement. Et je donne maintenant la parole à la représentante de Malte.
Thank you, President. I also thank Director General Grossi for his briefing. As we have heard, the situation regarding nuclear safety and security in Ukraine continues to be of great concern. Since February 2022, the world has watched with worry as Russia has occupied Zaporozhye, Europe's largest nuclear power plant, as part of its aggression against Ukraine. Let us not forget that the root of the problem is the illegal presence of Russian military personnel at the site. We stress the fact that without their presence, the situation we are discussing today would not exist. With this in mind, it is deeply regrettable that military activities in and around the facility as a result of Russia's actions have placed the nuclear safety and security of the entire continent in jeopardy. As stated by Director General Grossi, the situation is becoming increasingly unpredictable and consequently more dangerous. Such risks are completely unacceptable. While it remains occupied, the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant has been operating with significantly reduced staffing numbers. It has been reported that the Ukrainian staff who are still there are working in extremely challenging conditions, faced with intimidation, interrogation, and even abduction in some instances. A humanitarian corridor for the rotation of the management, operational and repair staff of the power plant is an idea that should be given serious consideration to make sure that the station continues to function in a safe way. We also note that in recent weeks there have been reports of evacuations from the town of Odar, which most staff and their families live. This creates further uncertainty about the staffing situation. We welcome the presence of IAEA staff deployed to Zaporozhye and other Ukraine power plants, but emphasize that this does not amount to a solution. Even in a shutdown state, the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant requires adequate maintenance and other work. President, Since Russia's illegal invasion and occupation of the region last February, the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant and its surrounding area have been exposed to dangerous military activity. The power lines essential to the operation and maintenance of safety of the plant have been damaged on a number of occasions. Malta deeply regrets that despite assurances, Rosatom has not been granted access to the IAEA to the Zaporozhye thermal power plant, which has provided backup power for the nuclear power plant in the past. Access for the IAEA must be granted urgently. While we welcome the delivery of 200 portable power systems to Ukraine to compensate for frequent power losses, as well as the agreement reached earlier this month between the IAEA, France, and Energoatom for the delivery of necessary spare parts for emergency diesel generators of the South Ukraine nuclear power plant, we also underline the need for guarantees of uninterrupted power supply to Zaporozhye nuclear power plant from the territory under the control of the government of Ukraine. President, Malta also welcomes the recent adoption by consensus of the UN General Assembly resolution on the persistent legacy of the Chernobyl disaster. The adoption by consensus of this resolution is indicative of the importance placed by the international community on nuclear safety and security in Ukraine, and the significance of the serious long-term consequences of nuclear disasters. The risks currently posed to nuclear safety and security in Ukraine, endangering the entire world, are a direct consequence of Russia's illegal, unjustified, and unprovoked war against Ukraine. Once again, Malta reiterates its call on the Russian Federation to immediately cease its war of aggression and withdraw all its forces and military equipment from Ukraine's internationally recognized borders. We also remain supportive of the IAEA's continued efforts to finding a permanent solution for the safety and integrity of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. In this regard, Malta welcomes the principles, as outlined today, which constitute an important foundation to continue to build and guide future discussions. The return of fully legitimate control over the facility to the competent Ukrainian authorities included the militarization and deoccupation of the ZNPP is a first priority. This is a key prerequisite for restoring not only nuclear safety and security, but also respect for international law. We thank the Director General for his relentless efforts and the experts that form part of the IAEA support and assistance mission to the Zaporozhye for their valuable work. Thank you.
Je remercie la représentante de Malte et je donne maintenant la parole au représentant de l'Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished members of the Security Council, I also recognize the representative of Putin's regime in the permanent seat of the Soviet Union. I would like to thank Director General Grossi for his briefing. We express our appreciation for professionalism and commitment of the IAEA mission's experts at Zaporozhye NPP, temporarily and illegally occupied by Russia. They continue to work under extreme, precarious conditions caused by regular, dangerous provocations by the Russian troops. We praise the bravery of the Ukrainian personnel working in the inhumane conditions of constant intimidation and threats of detention and torture by the Russian military. Russian forces have mined the perimeter and shelled ZNPP site and the adjacent areas. These actions have led to the violation of the physical integrity of the power plant and serious damage to the station and its facilities, thus posing a direct threat to life and health of the operating personnel. The shelling seriously undermines the nuclear safety of the plant and could lead to a nuclear incident or accident. This is a clear purpose of Pillar 1 of the IAEA Director General's 7 indispensable pillars of nuclear safety and security, which envisages the physical integrity of nuclear installations that must be maintained, whether it is the reactors, fuel ponds, or radioactive waste stores. Russian military activities regularly lead to the loss of off-site power. There were 7 emergency cases since the beginning of the Russian illegal occupation, when the plant was in blackout, running only on diesel generators. The most recent blackout case occurred a week ago on May 22nd, after the Russian missile attack resulted in the disconnection of the last high-voltage transmission line, notably Dniprovska line, that supplied power for in-house needs of ZNPP. Thanks to the work of Ukrainian power engineers, the operation of the transmission line was restored at noon of the same day, and ZNPP was reconnected to power from the Ukrainian power system. Russia continues to actively use the nuclear plant for military purpose, deploying there about 500 military personnel and 50 units of heavy weaponry. Equipment, munition, and explosives are located in the turbine buildings of units number 1, 2, and 4 of the plant. The threat of dangerous accident as a result of these irresponsible and criminal actions hangs over us. In this regard, we support the commitment of the IAEA Director General to fix this inappropriate situation and restore nuclear safety and security at ZNPP in line with above-mentioned 7 indispensable pillars. We take note of the Director General's principles to help ensure nuclear safety and security at ZNPP. They are partially based on 7 indispensable principles that are applicable to any nuclear facility throughout the globe. In case of ZNPP, however, due to the uniqueness of the situation, illegal occupation of the station by another state, these principles must be complemented with the demand of full demilitarization and deoccupation of the station. We reiterate that by illegally occupying ZNPP and making it an element of its military strategy, Russia has violated all key international principles of nuclear safety and security and the vast majority of its obligations under international treaties. One could hardly consider Russia to be a reliable partner able to adhere to undertaking commitments. For its part, the Ukrainian side reconfirms that we have never resorted and will never resort to any action that could lead to a nuclear incident in the Ukrainian nuclear power plant. We realize the catastrophic consequences of such an incident for both Ukraine and neighboring states, and that's why our position on the fundamental principle of ensuring nuclear safety and security of ZNPP remains clear and consistent. To ultimately remove the nuclear threats stemming from the illegal Russian presence at the plant, the troops and weaponry must be withdrawn, the station must be deoccupied and returned under the legitimate full control of Ukraine. I would like to remind that a clear call upon Russia to immediately cease all actions against and at ZNPP in order for the competent Ukrainian authorities to regain full control over this facility is also enshrined in the relevant resolutions of the IAEA Board of Governors. In this regard, the principles to ensure nuclear safety and security at ZNPP should also include the following elements. First, withdrawal of troops and all other Russian personnel illegally present at the station. Second, guarantees of uninterrupted power supply to ZNPP from the territory under the control of the government of Ukraine. Third, humanitarian corridor to ensure the rotation of management, operational and repair personnel at ZNPP in order to maintain the plant in a safe condition. We also deem it necessary to include the above elements as well as the reference to the need to fully implement the above-mentioned resolutions of the IAEA Board of Governors regarding the situation in Ukraine to a new resolution of the Board of Governors, if such document is proposed for adoption at its next session. Ukraine consistently adheres to the approaches to the prevention of a nuclear accident at ZNPP, which are reflected in the UN General Assembly Resolution A/Res/ES 11/6, principles of the Charter of the United Nations underlying a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine, as well as in the peace formula of the President of Ukraine. I wish to recall that radiation and nuclear safety is the first point of the peace formula of the President of Ukraine, and it is vitally important to further consolidate efforts around this initiative, the implementation of which will ensure a just and lasting peace in Ukraine and prevent the recurrence of similar crimes in future, including in nuclear area. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de l'Ukraine de sa déclaration et je redonne à présent la parole à M. Rafael Grossi pour ses mots de conclusion.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I would like to thank you and distinguished members of the Council, as well as the distinguished representative ambassador of Ukraine for the important elements they have given us today. They constitute undoubtedly an expression of support to the work of the IAEA since the beginning of the war. We take note of different nuances and particular aspects raised by all around this table. I think, as my distinguished Brazilian colleague was saying, there may be differences, but there is consensus in this room around the idea that there should never be a nuclear accident. And for this, the work of the IAEA is truly indispensable. I think, Mr. President, today, in the midst of this complex and concerning circumstances that we have been living for the last year and a half, today constitutes a step in the right direction when it comes to the safety and the security of the Zaporozhye Nuclear Power Plant. We are encouraged by the expressions of support to our work, including on the 7 indispensable pillars and the 5 principles that I have established today. And we commit ourselves to continue working to consolidate them and to be even more effective in protecting this facility. I also express our readiness, as was indicated on different interventions, to continue keeping you abreast and informed about the situation, including the implementation of an observance of the 5 principles that I enumerated today. All I would say is that our work continues. ISAMS is and continues to be present there. We will continue and reinforce our presence to avoid what must be avoided at all costs, that on top of the situation that we are living through this conflict, we would add the unspeakable tragedy of a nuclear accident. That should never happen. The IAEA will spare no effort to make sure that that is not the case. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Je remercie M. Grossi pour les précisions qu'il a apportées et pour ses conclusions. Il n'y a plus d'oratrices ou d'orateurs inscrits sur la liste. Avant de lever la séance, qui est la dernière prévue pour le mois de mai, je souhaite adresser les sincères remerciements de la délégation suisse aux membres du Conseil et au secrétariat du Conseil pour l'appui qu'ils nous ont fourni. Au terme d'un mois chargé, nous pouvons nous féliciter d'avoir su dégager un consensus autour de plusieurs questions importantes dont nous étions saisis. Nous n'aurions pas pu y parvenir seuls et l'ardeur de la tâche, l'appui et le concours de chaque délégation et des représentants du secrétariat ainsi que de l'équipe d'appui technique, du personnel chargé du service des séances, des interprètes, des traducteurs, des rédacteurs de procès-verbaux et du personnel de sécurité y sont pour beaucoup. Alors que notre présidence se termine, je sais que tous les membres du Conseil s'associent à moi pour souhaiter bonne chance à la délégation des Émirats arabes unis qui prend la présidence pour le mois de juin. La séance est levée.